Hello everyone, and welcome to the Improving Scottish Football podcast. My name is Kieran Hennigan, and we have got a great episode in store for you with Blair Munn, who is a UEFA A licence holder and is the first team coach at East Kilbride. Today we're going to be talking a lot about how we bring through elite talent in Scotland. And Blair's worked with the likes of Lennon Miller, Gabe Forsyth, Callum Sandilands, and we're going to chat about all these guys and kind of what sets them apart. Before we kind of get started though, there are thousands of you who now listen to this podcast, and that's a really big thank you from me. I couldn't do it without you guys, and I feel like we're kind of building a bit of a community here. But the majority of people who listen to the pod haven't actually hit the follow button or the subscribe button. So if you could do me that huge favour and hit the follow or subscribe button, I will try and continue to produce the podcast that you enjoy. I can't tell you how much it helps the show. It helps us get bigger, and it would mean the world to me. And now that that's been said, let's jump into the podcast. So Blair, a very warm welcome to the pod. Thank you for joining me. How are you, first of all?
Yeah, all good, Kieran. Thanks very much for inviting me on the podcast. I've listened to a few in the recent months, so looking forward to kind of sharing my experiences and some of my thoughts as well. So yeah, all good here.
Great. So can you give us a kind of quick introduction to yourself for those who don't know you?
Yeah, so I'm currently first team coach at East Kilbride in the Lowland League. I also have my own private academy, which I kind of co-own and run with Callum Tappin and Robbie Thompson. So that's called Pro Performance Academy. In terms of kind of my background, I was a youth player kind of growing up at Rangers and Falkirk. Lucky enough to play for Scotland as well. Kind of progressed through and probably never made it to the kind of level that I was ideally looking for, and kind of moved into the coaching, which I've kind of done for the last 10 years or so. So lots of different experiences, good and bad, and hopefully can kind of discuss a few points on that as well.
Great. What age group did you play for Scotland at?
So I played at under 15s and 16s, so it was the 1995 age group. So some players that were in that were Cammy Smith, who played for Aberdeen, St Mirren, Dundee United and stuff. Craig Sibbald, who's obviously now at Dundee United. Jamie Lindsay, who's playing down south, who came through at Celtic. And a number of other players as well. So Stuart Finlay, who's obviously at Kilmarnock. So yeah, great experience playing against some different countries as well. And when you look back, some of the best days of your life, to be honest.
Yeah. All right. So talk to me a little bit about. We're just going to jump straight into the good stuff. The elite talent. It feels like there's quite a few good Scottish players coming through at that younger age. Are you kind of seeing that? You know, is this new generation possibly more promising than kind of what's gone before potentially?
Yeah, so I think you can look at that in a few ways. I'm obviously lucky enough within my own academy to work with a number of these young players who are doing really well in terms of either in Scotland, England, or some abroad as well. So I definitely do think there is a good group of talent coming through. There's obviously some that are currently playing first team or some that are very close to that, and then even the younger ones behind that. But yeah, it's obviously a passion of mine in terms of young players. But yeah, I do think there is a lot of young talent coming through, and it'll be interesting just to see how they kind of develop over the next year or two as well.
Cool. So talk to us about some of the guys that you've worked with and probably some of the names that we'll probably recognise.
Yeah, so obviously quite lucky. I've worked with a number of players that I actually seen when they were kind of 7, 8, 9-year-old. So for me, it's been a kind of proud moment to kind of see them kind of progress from obviously really young kids through to now full-time professionals playing at really high levels. So for example, I worked with Gabe Forsyth, who you kind of mentioned earlier, who I had at Falkirk when he was maybe 7 or 8, and he's obviously now playing in the English Championship at Norwich. So Gabe's a player that I've kept really close to, got a good relationship with Gabe. So again, really good talent within that team. There was Xander Hutton as well, who was actually on the bench for Rangers at Old Trafford on Thursday night in Europe. So again, really proud moment to see that, even though you've kind of only played a small part. And then through my academy, I've been lucky enough to work with a number of players, the likes of Lennon Miller, who I'm sure we'll discuss, alongside Gabe and Zander, Callum Sandilands, Adam Forrester, Kyle Ewer, Kai Fotheringham. So there's been a lot of, probably kind of not forgot, but probably can't mention them all. But yeah, lucky enough within my own academy to work with a number of these players during the summer, especially, but then throughout the season as well.
So some amazing talent in there. What do you think sets these guys apart in terms of, getting to that kind of elite level? Like, are they paying attention to the analytical side of the game? Are they really switched on in terms of, the tactical side of football?
Yep.
What are you noticing now?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, with all these players, have obviously got ability, but I think when you'd kind of sent the kind of points through it, I've kind of looked at a number of players that I kind of worked with throughout the summer and at different times, and for me, there's kind of three main things that I think a lot of them have got in common. So I think they want to get better, which is a big thing. So for example, bringing in the summer Lennon, Gabe, Zander, all the players, Kai, Lewis, etc., they all want to get better. So they're not just coming in to tick over and do sessions. They actually want to get better. So for me, that's an elite kind of mindset that the players have got. Kind of second point is their mindset. So I look at them now and I kind of think back to when I was a young player, that they've got that kind of inner confidence and that inner self-belief that maybe a lot of players potentially lack. I think some of these players that I'm lucky enough to kind of work with, I can see that they've got it. They really believe that they belong at the kind of top level in the game, whether they're there just now or they're trying to get there. And then the last thing, and it's something that I try and tell as many players that I kind of work with at the younger age groups, the kind of attention to detail of the small details, for me is probably the three when I look at them when they come in and train. So yeah, for me, obviously great talents, but I think they have all got the kind of three kind of key points that hopefully I've kind of helped them to get to where they are, but will hopefully help them push on to potentially some bigger and better things as well.
And what do you typically work with them on? I mean, I guess it's all kind of very individual, but if you're taking Gabe Forsyth, for instance, in his breaks from Norwich, is it purely on his playing, or are you looking at the tactical side of things?
Yeah, so I think when the players come into our academy, we're obviously trying to keep them working on their breaks. So you're doing a lot of technical work. So for example, if it's Gabe and his finishing, just for example, but we then bring them together in groups as well. So throughout the summer, we work probably for about 3 to 4 weeks within group sessions, and obviously the standard's really high. You're getting around maybe in total around 20 to 25 players, kind of coming at different times. So yeah, you're working mostly on their technical, obviously a little bit on their fitness, and then anything kind of specific to their game that they want to work on. For example, I had Kai Fotheringham, who's currently playing at Dundee United, in last week, try to work on his finishing. So again, that's I'll say a young player he is. He's coming up maybe 20 or 21, but again, still looking to work on his game. So yeah, you're probably looking at the kind of technical aspect that relates to the position that they're playing. Some obviously physical attributes as well in terms of keeping them fit throughout the summer, and then any kind of tactical points that they kind of want to work on. But yeah, it's a real privilege to work with these players that are obviously playing at a really high level, and it's probably a good thing that they put the trust in myself and Callum and the other coaches as well to kind of help them through that time as well.
And that mindset that you talked about and that desire to get better, do you think you're noticing that now more across the board with young players? Is that potentially something that players in Scotland maybe lacked in the past, or maybe wasn't as prevalent as it is now?
Yeah, I would say so. I think nowadays a lot of the players that I'm seeing, whether that's kind of within the academy or out at games and different things and speaking to people, I think a lot of players now do have that inner confidence, that inner self-belief, which to get to the very top, I think you need, as long as you can obviously back it up, which a lot of these players can do. But if I think back to kind of my time growing up, I probably worried about everything. I was probably quite anxious in terms of making mistakes, and if I had a bad game, I would let that kind of eat into my next 3 or 4 days. Whereas I look at these players, and I think they've got the right balance. And again, I can only kind of speak for when I see the players and when I'm speaking to them, whether that's on the pitch or over a coffee or lunch or whatever. That I think they've got that inner belief, but that kind of relaxed as well in terms of if they have a good game, brilliant. But sometimes if they do have a bad game, it's about kind of realising what you've done wrong, but then forgetting about it and moving on. I think that's a key skill as well. So that inner belief, but kind of having that kind of relaxed mentality at times as well, which can help you. Whereas I look back on kind of me growing up, and I don't think I was ever relaxed. So yeah, I definitely think it's kind of changing, and hopefully that's changing for the better as well.
Yeah. And in terms of kind of spotting them, obviously, you're working with these guys at 9, 10 years old, you say. Is that too early an age to spot elite talent, or can you see it at that age? Because you've obviously got late developers who sometimes maybe they're not as advanced when they're 9 and 10 and they catch up in later years. What's your kind of perspective on how you spot elite talent and the right kind of age to see what their potential is?
Yeah, I don't think there's a right or a wrong. For example, I'll give a quick insight to the young Falkirk team. Obviously, Falkirk have always been kind of renowned for having a good academy in terms of producing players. Just before it kind of stopped, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So within that Falkirk team, you had Gabe Forsyth, you had Kerr Robertson, who's at Rangers, Xander Hutton, who's at Rangers as well. You had Gregor Crookston, Kenzie Nair, who are both at Hearts. Leighton Grant was also in that Falkirk team. So that's, for example, a 7-a-side team, and there's probably a good 7 or 8 players within that squad that were only maybe at that time 9 or 10. So, but yeah, I think you do get late developers. I've seen that obviously throughout my career growing up as a player, but as a coach as well. But yeah, I probably think when you see them at 9 or 10, you can sense and spot little things that they maybe do in terms of either technical, so their technical skills, or for example how they kind of move as well. But obviously, when you're getting a young kid at 8 or 9, there's a long way to go in terms of how they develop, either kind of technically, tactically, and potentially the love of the game as well. But yeah, I think you can spot it at times, and then at other times, some players will surprise you and they'll be really good at 9 and 10, and potentially maybe not as good at 15, 16. And then you get some players that are maybe not at the kind of maybe the top bracket at 9 or 10, but when the time comes when they're 15 or 16, they've maybe developed and kind of pushed on a lot. So yeah, I think you can see it at times, but other times things surprise you as well in terms of how players develop.
Do you think there's a risk, if a player isn't quite falling into that kind of elite category at such a young age, that they then miss out on that kind of pro youth setup, and by the time they get around to that 16, 17, they've kind of not really had the same opportunities that were afforded to I think there's maybe like 2,500 kids who are maybe in the pro youth setup in Scotland out of, I don't know what, 200,000 kids who play football. You're selecting such a tight group of kids at that early age. And so, my concern is, that some kids that might develop into elite players miss out on all that kind of great coaching and great development.
Yeah, I think at times, obviously, people have their views on the pro youth system, good and bad. So yeah, I think going into an academy probably gives you that opportunity to potentially get better coaching, probably train more often, and probably train with a better standard of player more often than not. To, for example, somebody that maybe stays grassroots and, for example, trains 2 nights a week, and it's potentially a coach and maybe a parent that's taking the sessions. That's the difficulty. I've got so much respect for the guys that do that in terms of the coaches and the parents, because they're doing it for nothing, a lot of time and effort. But then again, I can see it in the other way, is that everybody's journey is different. So, for example, if you look at a few players, so like Keelan Adams, who played against us probably 5 to 6 weeks ago. He's at Falkirk. He came, played for, I think it was Strathclyde or Glasgow Uni. I think it was one of the two. Went to Cumbernauld Colts, and he's now playing every week in the Championship and doing really well. Probably one of the best players in that league. So I think for me, every journey is different. Just because you're in an academy at 8 and 9, that doesn't mean that you're going to progress through and become a professional player. But it also means just because you're not an academy that you can't do that. So yeah, I think what academies do give you is the opportunity to train more often, and hopefully a good environment with good coaches that are qualified, and that can help you. But I think every single player's journey is different. Some players potentially at the young age, it can be a lot for them, not just for them, but the parents as well, in terms of the pressure and the demand, in terms of training 3 or 4 times a week. So, and some players maybe just aren't ready at that moment in time. But yeah, I think the high potential players will more often than not get picked up from an academy, and then you hope to progress them through to potentially elite players. I don't think there's any elite player at 13, 14, 15, 16. I think they're high potential that hopefully when they progress through to, for example, guys at 19, 20, 21, they can then become elite players. But yeah, I think everybody's journey is different, and there's probably not one that's the same.
Yeah. A couple of players I'll just kind of mention. This is diving a little bit into the past here, but just for a little bit of context, Stevie Chalmers, who obviously scored, the winning goal in the European Cup for Celtic. He didn't enter professional football until he was 23. And Alex James at Arsenal, who was kind of the Dennis Bergkamp of his time. He wasn't good enough to get into his local side at 17 years old. So you do have those kind of late developers. The pressure that young players face, I'm quite intrigued by that, because I get the feeling that there's especially a lot of parents live their football dreams through their kids as well. There's a lot of pressure on these guys at such a young age, because obviously with all that pressure on their shoulders, the vast majority of them are ultimately not going to make it.
Yeah, so I think clubs, and obviously if it's coaches, I think it's your kind of job to try and help the young players. Something that we do at Pro Performance is to try to educate the parents as well, to kind of let them understand what an academy journey is like. If I was to again kind of go back just to kind of my experiences, you're training 3-4 times a week. You're playing on a Sunday or a Saturday, whenever it is. So there's five sessions. And I did feel the pressure, but I actually quite enjoyed that side of it. I always felt that you were kind of either trying to play well to stay in the team, or to satisfy your dad or your coach or the head of youth or whatever it was. So yeah, I do think there is pressure, but I've obviously kind of coached within Rangers Academy as well, and I never ever felt that I was putting pressure on kids. I always felt that you're trying to kind of help them fulfil their potential. But again, I think probably that maybe the players do feel that pressure, that they're always wanting to play well, they want to be the best. So yeah, I think it's just how you deal with that pressure. Like I always say that the players that I'm kind of working with at the younger age groups, like, you're here to make mistakes, you're here to get better. Like, nobody will remember the mistake you made in an under-14s game at the weekend. It's about how you deal with the mistakes, the setbacks, and try and deal with the pressure. But yeah, I think trying to educate the player and educate the parent is really important. And the kind of people that the players got round about them, not to put too much pressure on them, because that pressure will eventually come at some point as the players get older. So, but yeah, I think young players potentially looking to get scouted, maybe that pressure every Saturday, whereas you want kids to relax and enjoy it, and feel comfortable within their environment, that they can go and kind of express who they are, as well. So yeah, dealing with pressures, it's a big thing in football, and it'll always be there. But I think there's different ways that you can kind of help and support the players and the parents on that as well.
Cool. So let's have a chat about how we actually bring some of these young players through into kind of first teams, ideally in the Scottish Premiership, because obviously it's well publicised that we are generally appalling at giving minutes to under 21s, or any any young kind of Scottish players, but I'm picking the under-21s because there was a good stat that was released a week or two ago. Minutes given to under-21 players in league matches. The Scottish Premiership is 2% compared to Belgium's 11%, Norway's 11%, Netherlands 9%, and we're well outside the top kind of 10 in Europe for that. And pretty much the only club, surprise, surprise, that comes out with kind of pass marks is Motherwell, of course. How do we get young players playing regular minutes in the Premiership?
Yeah, so I think it's obviously a kind of real topic of football in Scotland just now. I think it's always hard. Listen, I'm massive on young players and trying to develop and watch these young players kind of flourish. But I think it's always hard when you've not been in, for example. So I've not been in a manager's shoes at, for example, at Hearts, at Hibs, at Dundee United. I've not done it. I don't understand the pressure of it. Obviously, at East Kilbride, I'm the first team coach. So there's probably less pressure on you as a first team coach. But I've never stood in the dugout and been a manager at that level in terms of the SPL. So I think first of all, I've got to kind of understand that as well. However, I look at the players just now, for example, that are playing. So you've got at Hearts, you've got Adam Forrester and James Wilson. I don't think they've let Hearts down. If anything, I think they've probably improved Hearts as well in certain areas. Obviously, James Wilson is really good talent. Bit younger than Adam, but Adam's came in at right back and done really well. Not made Hearts any worse, for example. You look at Hibs on obviously the other side of the city, you've got Rudy Maloktonov, who's came in and done well. Again, a young player given an opportunity, probably not let the club down. You obviously look at Motherwell as well. Obviously, Lennon's probably getting a lot of the minutes in terms of kind of playing week in, week out. Obviously, he's injured just now. I look at St Mirren, another player that I've kind of worked with through the JD Performance School at Graham High is Callum Penman. I think he's only 17. So, again, obviously, great result for St Mirren. So, again, I think he came on against Rangers. So, you look at, obviously, Dundee United with Kai and Miller, and probably another few. And you look at Dundee, who have probably got 2 or 3 young players that have now played for 2 or 3 years and will probably end up selling on. So, yeah, I think it's a difficult one. Obviously, managers are getting sacked so often now. I think something's got to change with that in terms of lasting 4 or 5, 6 games. I don't think you can put young players in probably when you're under that much pressure. But I think the young players, especially in Scotland and at the top level that have came in, I think most of the time they do well. Even for example, I think Bobby Wales scores yesterday for Kilmarnock. So yeah, I think the players that come in do well. Obviously, you need to be ready. You need to be good enough. The manager needs to trust you as well. But I think there is players out there that are good enough, and they just probably need that opportunity. Like a number of the players have had, like Lennon gets given an opportunity to play, and probably will go on to make Motherwell quite a lot of money as well. So yeah, it's probably a hard one, but I think there is enough talent in Scotland to get more of these players into first teams across the country.
Yeah, I'm hoping the situation is slightly improving. I think the likes of Lennon have made it very clear that actually, if you play a 16-year-old, as he was, because he was 16 when he broke into the first team, that actually they can do rather well in the team. So yep. I think now that hopefully, we've seen that there's been quite a few success stories now coming through. Hopefully that is going to show a positive example, yep. and more teams are going to start trusting yep. their young players.
Yeah, I think as well. I think you kind of get that balance as well with, for example, like your Gabes, who have actually went down earlier, but ultimately are now playing it, for me, a real high level in the English Championship. Obviously, there's a number of other players that are playing. I think there's obviously a couple of boys at Sheffield United and a couple at Aston Villa that are getting close to either training or playing with the first team. And for example, if they were in Scotland, would they have that opportunity? Obviously, nobody knows. But yeah, I think there's a lot of good players in Scotland that are currently close to a first team or playing, and then obviously the ones that have went down that little bit earlier as well.
What do you think to some sort of homegrown player rule? Would you like to see something like that come through?
Yeah, I I actually was listening to, I think it was maybe Ross McCormack on Open Goal a few weeks ago, and he was saying when he was at Rangers, I think they had the homegrown rule in, but he felt that it was just on the bench, just to be on the bench, rather than actually maybe deserving it. So there's probably that balance, but I think there's got to be something, either if it's the manager can't get sacked within his first 6 months, or a homegrown rule with two players, or manager's contract, there has to be two young players under the age of 20 in the match day squad. Again, I'm probably not the one to kind of put the rules in place, obviously, but I think there has got to be something, because I think there's a lot of good talent in Scotland and they just need that opportunity. However, on the flip side of that, I do feel for the managers in terms of how quick they can lose their job if they lose 2 or 3 games and they feel that pressure. So I do feel for the guys as well.
I was listening to the warm up, which is the kind of that program that kind of Gordon Duncan hosts, and Gordon, I think, is brilliant. They had they were talking about this very subject, and they had Gordon Strachan on, and I mean, Gordon's opinion was basically like, it's all on the player, and if the player doesn't make it through, it's the player's fault. Essentially, you've got to make it so that you have to be picked. Yeah,
I think obviously players need to be good enough to get in the team. However, on the flip side of that as well, you see sometimes clubs bringing players up from, for example, Conference in England or League Two or League One. Listen, there'll be some that are really good, but I've seen a lot that for me aren't better than what we've already got within the reserve teams at clubs or within the youth team. That's just my own opinion. Again, probably a wide range because every player's different. But yeah, I probably agree and disagree at times. I think it is up to the player. It's the player's responsibility to try and force his way into a first team. But again, that can change quick. It could be a manager really likes you and puts you in, or the current manager doesn't like you. He gets sacked, a new manager comes in, and you find yourself in the team. So again, I think you definitely need to be good enough. The manager needs to trust you. But I think in football as well, you probably need that little bit of luck as well, whether that's an injury to a first team player or a change of manager or whatever it is. So I listened to that podcast. It was actually really interesting, some of the kind of topics on it as well.
Yeah. And that sort of luck, I mean, Kilmarnock is probably quite a good example of that just now, because, Bobby Wales and David Watson possibly not getting as much game time as probably they deserve. And then, a few injuries and now, well, certainly Bobby Wales is getting his kind of shot and is repaying that faith.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Let's chat about B teams, because obviously at East Kilbride, you do come across the B teams. There's obviously been a lot of chat on this and a lot of negativity. But if we're just going to take it, about bringing young players through and creating those player pathways, do you think B teams are a good thing? Do you think they could work better? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I probably see it. Obviously, I've been lucky enough over the last kind of 4 or 5 years to see the B teams in the Lowland League. I probably look at it away from all the kind of politics and all that side of it. I just kind of look at it in terms of the game on a Saturday. So to be honest, I've got no issues with the B teams at all. I've actually enjoyed all the games, whether it's been Hearts, Celtic or Rangers. It's always good to see some young talent, good to see some players that you maybe work with and and so I've always enjoyed the games. Again, it depends in terms of, I think some of the players that, for example, Celtic, we've played now for the last 2 or 3 years, and some of the players are still playing in the B team, that are maybe now a little bit, for me, too old, so they could potentially go out on loan. And you're trying to get the young players at their clubs to potentially play. For example, it was great for James Wilson to get playing against men, playing every Saturday, understanding the game. For example, when you look at Rangers now, who have obviously came out the Lowland League for whatever reason, I probably don't know that, but I know a few players at Rangers that have potentially over the last maybe 18 months to 2 years have not played a lot of games, whereas I think if Rangers were still in the league, they could play every Saturday and then play, I think they want to play like the best v best during the week, so they could go and play an Aston Villa on a Wednesday, for example. So I've actually quite enjoyed the B teams. It's not been an issue to me. again, it's another way to try and help these young players. But yeah, it's just in terms of the kind of squad selection and who they play is obviously the topic.
In terms of the level that the B teams kind of play in, so talk to me a little bit about the Lowland League and the kind of quality that's in there, because I know that you guys play some really good stuff.
Yeah.
Is it the right kind of level for these guys to be these kind of 16, 17, 18-year-olds? Is it the right sort of level?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it can help the young players. So, for example, obviously, right now you're talking about Celtic and Hearts. So, for example, there's going to be players within the B teams that go on and play. So, for example, Daniel Kelly, who's went down and obviously playing in the Championship at Millwall. But there's going to be other players that come out of that and play League Two and League One in Scotland. So, I think playing in the Lowland League allows the young players to kind of see that environment, play on some difficult pitches, which will obviously give them a different environment to maybe what they've been used to growing up within Celtic and Hearts. And I think you're preparing the players for a different type of career, whether that's going on and playing at a full-time high level, or if they do need to kind of drop in and go part-time League Two. I think it's perfect. As I mentioned earlier, like for me, I think Rangers should probably still be in it and then try and play your best v best. So if you look at Celtic, this season they'll play against, for example, East Kilbride on a Saturday, and then they might have the UEFA Youth League on a Wednesday and they're playing against Atletico Madrid. So for me as a young player, I think you're getting the best of both there. But again, that's just kind of my opinion. I think there's a lot of good teams in the Lowland League. I think there's a lot of good players that have had a good career, experienced. Yeah, and I think it is. I think it is a good environment for them. Again, I think Celtic played James McCarthy once against us. I would rather see young players at 16, 17 play than, for example, James McCarthy. However, they've never done that again. That was just the one time. But yeah, I think it's good for the young players.
Has anyone ever seen James McCarthy since?
I actually don't think anybody has, no, and I don't think he wanted to be playing that game either. So, but no, as long as it's done the right way in terms of kind of 16, 17, 18. Again, there's not many 16-year-olds playing. Probably, I think Celtic have got a couple. I think Hearts have got a couple, but you're now seeing Hearts, obviously Macaulay Tate and Callum Sandilands, two players that we've worked with before as well. They're now away on loan to Montrose and Livingston. So. Yeah, I think it is good for them. I think it gives them that platform to kind of see what football's like at kind of first team level.
Cool. So before we wrap up, Blair, is there any other kind of key points that you really want to make about, how we bring our young players through or player development? Yeah, what's your, if you could have a blank slate, is there anything that you want to see happen?
Yeah, so obviously I'm going to probably a little bit biased because I'm in it kind of every day and seeing a lot of things, but I think there's a lot of good things going on. I think there's a lot of good coaches in Scotland as well. I think sometimes we can overlook or undervalue the coaches that we've got in Scotland at a youth level and kind of the older level as well. I think clubs try and do their best in terms of working with these young players. I think there can be more full-time roles and better pay for coaches. I think that's an issue straight away. Hence the reason that currently I'm not working within an academy. I think it's so difficult to do. But no, I think there's a lot going on. I think there's a lot of good coaches. I think there's a lot of good talent. And I think it's just everybody working together. Obviously, clubs are going to be divided because they're different clubs. But I think if everybody can work together, then yeah, I think we just need to keep working. I think you look at the Scotland national teams. Obviously they've kind of rejigged it a little bit, bringing in Neil McFarlane. I think that'll be good as well. A little bit of fresh energy, and I know the boys in the 19s enjoy his training. He was my coach at Falkirk, and I enjoyed him as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot of good things, but it can always be better. But yeah, I think a lot of boys that you're seeing now playing in Scotland who are young, also going down to England. I think England have got, most English teams have now got a full-time scout in Scotland, which for me is a good thing. It obviously means that the boys that are going down are doing well. So yeah, it's obviously a passion of mine, and yeah, I just think we're doing well, but we can always be better. Yeah, in terms of the resources that we've got.
Brilliant. All right, Blair. Listen, thank you so much for coming on the pod.
Excellent, thank you. No worries at all.
So big thank you for coming on, and a big thank you to everyone who was listening.